Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today, and we are taking another look today at 20th Century Boys, my favorite manga and possibly my favorite comic of all time. Certainly, as far as story-driven stuff goes, I think I might still put Calvin and Hobbes above this as far as illustrated works goes, but definitely favorite manga. And we are at the part of the story where we are really starting to set up the tools that Kenji is going to use to overcome his problems. And we have been introduced to Kenji, who is the moral core of this story, who has set up this problem that he now has to fix. We have seen that the consequences, if this goes unchallenged, are death. There are people out there who are willing to kill to get their way. They have very horrifying tools to do this at their disposal. They have come after Kenji personally. They've come after his family. Things are escalating, and Kenji has now been driven from his home. So who's going to help him work his way out of this impasse? He has friends at home, but they are not as capable and competent as you might want to get out of a situation like this. Now we enter Otcho. I'm probably not pronouncing his name correctly. In fact, I'm 99% sure I'm not, but that's okay. We're going to go with Otcho for the purposes of these videos. And he is, actually, we have seen Otcho before this point in the flashbacks to when Kenji was about 10 years old. He was a bright kid. He was probably the most reserved kid in the group. And it's interesting that he is, to contrast that with what we see here, because Otcho is he is Kenji's right hand, and Kenji in the story is the moral core, the thinker, the idea man, who works out the plots and how they're going to overcome them. And that used to be Otcho in the past. So what is he now? Well, we see him introduced in the manga like this in his adult form. Urosawa likes to do these shots where we see a person's feet, them walking somewhere. And he does that. I think this is visual language for a person with a distinct sense of purpose and direction heading along that path. And so we see Otcho's feet, and then we see him going where he's going to do what he's doing. And what he's doing is grabbing this guy by the hair and then proceeding. This is one of those things where the page turn, you talk about the page turn, like he's grabbing this guy by the hair. Why is he doing that? Well, it's just to beat the crap out of him. This isn't a threat. This isn't a shakedown. Otcho is just here to take care of business. And that is what he does now. He has grown up into this really hardened guy. He is the guy in Bangkok, according to the title of this chapter. He's living in Thailand after personal tragedy has kind of driven him out of modern society into this much rougher, more peripheral part of the world. He lives in the red light district. He does a lot of work in whorehouses and with travel agencies of people who are looking for very shady and sleazy kinds of entertainment in Bangkok. He is living a very difficult, very gritty life, very sharp contrast to the kind of lackadaisical, kind of complacent lives that Kenji and most of his friends are living. And this is what gives him the tool set to really come into this situation and be effective. He is no longer... Otcho has been humbled. Let's put it that way. All of his grandiose ideas about what his place in the world was going to be have been stripped away. Otcho was, a very mischievous kid, bright, as I said, when he was younger, and he thought he was going to be a big shot. He no longer has those illusions. He is seasoned. He is mature. And having lived in these difficult places, he is ready to... He brings that perspective to Kenji and his group. Because while Kenji is working on some things, and later in this volume, we learn that he has actually done a number of quite shocking things, like bombed places where the friend cult is at work and things like that. But Otcho is the one who can take some of that ruthless determination that Kenji has built up and direct it in ways that will be practical and effective. And it's it's the introduction of this character and the knowledge that this character can bring that skill set that makes us begin to feel confident that we can win this. And at the same time, this is not just an introduction of a badass who is going to come in and kick butt and take names and set everything right. No, we learn a lot of things about Otcho in this. He is, he used to have a family and they all died in a tragic accident, and he has had to build back up his sense of himself after losing his family and this thing that he invested so much of his time in. He gave up his career, which he thought he was working for his family, but which they don't seem to have really, it seems to have prevented him from connecting with his family as deeply as he might have liked. He has seen that a lot of the things that he thought were important are not important anymore. And in the modern day, we see him dealing with drug dealers and wayward tourists and regretful prostitutes in Bangkok. And he does it with an incredible amount of compassion. And even as he digs deeper into this, he finds that the Friend Cult, now known as the Friendship Democratic Party, or FDP, which is a political faction in Japan now, he finds that they are at work in Thailand and they are producing some drugs which they are distributing, and he goes and he hunts down these drugs, and he destroys the stockpile, and he deals with the people producing it, all on his own, I might add. But he isn't vengeful about it. He just thinks this is a thing that he should do. He has the capacity to do it, and because he finds the symbol, it is set up that Otcho is probably the only one of Kenji's friend group that remembers the symbol of their secret society that eventually became the symbol of the FDP, and he finds a pin. They are apparently now producing these pins with that symbol on it. And he finds one of these on a member of the FDP who he rescues while he's on holiday in Thailand, probably checking up on these drug factories that they've got. And he puts all this together and eventually gets in touch with Kenji. Kenji has been looking for him for the past couple of years, and he heads back to Japan. And that is the end, pretty much. There's a couple of chapters, really just a chapter and a half, showing him meeting Kenji and setting up the plans that Kenji has, and kind of, Otcho beginning to realize that he has to take a hand here and start to refine these if they are going to really stand up against the kind of scumbags he found in Thailand and the kind of people who have been harassing Kenji all this time. This is a really great introduction of a character, and it shows that Urosawa was really thinking over how he was going to continue to build up his gallery of characters. Because Otcho is not a character who could have been in the story from the beginning. He is too competent. He is too clear-minded. He is too far outside of normal life. And what I mean by that is the early part of the story is all about Kenji breaking away from his complacency that has been brought on by his normal life. And there's nothing wrong with Kenji having that kind of complacency. Nothing wrong with Kenji living in that world. He has a family to take care of, and he has priorities that have to be upheld. Otcho doesn't have those priorities anymore, not because he's a better person than Kenji, but in many ways because he's a worse person. At least he lived most of his life with misplaced priorities that set him up for a very bad fall, the likes of which Kenji and his friends have never had. And that has opened his eyes to a lot of important facts that Kenji and his friends have missed. And his priorities by this point in the story are probably better than Kenji's are. Or at least better than they were at the beginning of the story. So you can't really have him around because he would reach Kenji's conclusions faster and not give Kenji the opportunity for character growth. So from the point of view of a writer, Urosawa knew he had to move Otcho out of the early act of the story and into one of these later acts. So right off the bat, we see that Urosawa is not tied up in his favorite characters or in the best characters. Otcho is one of the best characters in 20th Century Boys, from the perspective of being fascinating and engaging and, for lack of a better word, cool. He's a really cool character. And a less confident or a less skilled writer would have put this character in at the beginning to try and grab the audience's attention and hold it. But Urosawa had confidence in the mystery of his early story and in the exploration of Kenji's character, and he had enough confidence that he could make that interesting, that he could wait to include one of his best characters until 30, 40 chapters into the story. And that makes everything better because we don't have to try and keep Otcho from knowing about what Kenji is going through and, not allow him to sort out all of these issues for Kenji. And instead, Kenji can grow and develop until the point where he really needs Otcho. And really past that point, because Otcho does not get to Kenji until about 2 years after Kenji is run out of his own house. It's by this point, it's 1999. The turn of the millennium is almost upon us, and things are about to get very real. So this character introduction is great. The writing is great. The timing is great. The character himself is great. Unlike many of the things that can happen here, which are good, it can be a little bit quirky. I'm looking at you, Kami-sama. I like that character, but man, he's kind of off the wall sometimes. This is one of the best executed dynamics, I think, Kenji and Otcho in the entire story. And it is a masterclass in how to write two characters who took very divergent roads and who come back together and find that while they have a lot to learn from each other, they are still very much united in morals and purpose. Really great stuff. It is, I think, the cornerstone on which this sense that Kenji and his group of friends must regain some things that they had lost from their childhood. And Otcho is the cornerstone of that because he is the one who seems to have remembered it his whole life. He shared it with his family. He remembers it when he sees it on the streets of Bangkok and finds the FDP pin. He is the one who seems to have retained that the most. And yeah, he is the one who is going to be able to come together with Kenji, who has just rediscovered all of these things, and really form a solid core for their group to coalesce around so they can really fight against Friend and his cult. And that's where we stand at the end of Volume 2. Or really Volume 4, I suppose, because this is the omnibus, so it collects 2 volumes in each volume. This is an 11-volume series, and you may be surprised that this is where we are already. And that is because 20th Century Boys is not just a simple story about friends coming together. In fact, it reminds me of an anime I watched called Gurren Lagann, which is described as a story that shows a man coming of age into every age a man can come into, from the beginning of their life till the end. 20th Century Boys is not just a story about boys who grow into men and have to square their ambitions of heroism against the realities of the world. It is also the story of men who are not as great heroes as they wish they could be. But that, something we will discuss in Volume 3. So look forward to that, and I hope you enjoyed what you got today. If you did, there's a like button and a subscribe button down below. You can use those as you see fit. I will talk to you later.